Hello everyone. In today's video I bring you a fascinating story that will challenge all of your beliefs. Let's meet Melisande Kincaid, a scientist who always believed that science had all the answers, until, in a critical moment, she faced death and returned with a shocking vision about the future of Earth. And more than that, she brings us an urgent warning for October 2024. What Melisande saw on the other side will change the way you see life and what's to come. So, before we get started, go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any incredible content like this, and turn on the notification bell to get all the updates. Now, get ready for this revealing and surprising journey. Hello, my name is Melisande Kincaid. Before sharing my story with you, I need to confess something. For a long time, I was a staunch skeptic. I worked as a research scientist for the government and always firmly believed that science had all the answers. The spiritual, well, for me, it was just a curiosity of the past, something I left behind when I became an adult. I saw the world through the lenses of logic and reason, and anything that couldn't be explained by scientific methods was simply dismissed as superstition or fantasy. My life was dedicated to research and empirical knowledge. I spent my days in laboratories, analyzing data and conducting experiments. I was convinced that everything in the universe could be explained through formulas and theories. The idea of a reality beyond the physical, it never even crossed my mind. However, as they say, life has a peculiar way of surprising us. And that's exactly what happened to me. Everything changed in a moment of crisis, when life pushed me to the brink of death and granted me a vision that would completely transform my understanding of the world. Before this transformative event, I was battling my own demons. Alcoholism was a constant shadow in my life, a form of escape that I used to cope with the stress of work and an unhappy marriage. I was trapped in a toxic relationship with Jonah, a man who exploited my insecurity and low self-esteem. Amidst this emotional chaos, my body started giving signs that something was wrong. Unexplained hemorrhages became a warning that I stubbornly ignored. I was so focused on keeping up appearances, on being the successful scientist everyone expected me to be, that I neglected my own health and well-being. I clearly remember the day I made a joke about cheating death, with no idea of the weight that phrase would soon carry. It was my way of dealing with stress, trying to alleviate the constant tension I felt. Little did I know that I was about to face an experience that would challenge everything I believed about life and death. This is my story. The story of how a skeptical scientist had her worldview turned upside down. It's a tale of transformation, of pain, but also of rebirth and discovery. I hope that by sharing my journey, I can offer a different perspective on life, death, and everything that exists between those two extremes. That morning started like any other. I woke up early, had a strong cup of coffee, and headed to the lab. It was just another day at work, or at least that's what I thought. I was in the middle of a crucial experiment when everything changed. Suddenly, I was struck by excruciating pain. It felt like someone had plunged a knife into my abdomen and was slowly twisting it. I tried to ignore it, thinking it might just be a particularly strong cramp, but the pain only intensified. I remember looking at my colleagues, trying to keep my composure. I didn't want to appear weak. I didn't want them to think I couldn't handle a little discomfort. But then, the world started spinning. The voices around me became distant, as if they were coming from far away. The last thing I saw before darkness took over were the alarmed faces of my colleagues. Their expressions of concern were etched in my memory. And then, nothing. When I woke up, I was no longer in my body. It's hard to describe the sensation. It was like I was a bubble of consciousness, floating near the ceiling of the emergency room. I could see everything, in all directions at once. It was a strange and fascinating perspective. I watched the doctors working frantically over my body. Their voices were clear, but they had an ethereal quality. I heard one of them shout, "We're losing her," and another respond, "Increase the voltage." It was surreal to see my own body lying there, motionless, while I floated above, fully aware. The sound of the heart monitor transformed into an eerie warning, flatline. In that moment, I felt a mix of panic and a strange calm. It was as if one part of me knew this was the end, while another part refused to believe it. I tried to scream, to tell the doctors that I was there, that I could see them and hear them. But I had no voice. I had no body. I was just consciousness. It was at that moment I realized I had died, or at least my body had, but I still existed. This was a shocking revelation for someone who always believed that death was the absolute end. As I observed the scene below, I began to feel a sense of detachment. The initial panic gave way to an almost scientific curiosity. I was experiencing something that went beyond everything I knew, something that defied all the physical laws I had studied. And then, something even more extraordinary happened. A light began to form around me. It wasn't like any light I had ever seen. It was bright, but not blinding. Warm, but not hot. It was as if the light itself was alive, conscious. As the light intensified, I felt myself being drawn towards it. It wasn't a physical pull, since I no longer had a physical body. It was more like my very essence was being called. In that moment, I experienced a sense of expansion. It was as if the boundaries of my being were dissolving, merging with something greater. The consciousness I called me seemed to be spreading, encompassing more than I ever imagined possible. Amid this expansion, I realized I could see in all directions simultaneously. It wasn't sight in the traditional sense, since I had no eyes. It was more like a complete and instantaneous awareness of everything around me. I could sense the presence of other consciousnesses, though I couldn't see them in the way we normally see people. Time seemed not to exist in this state. There was no past or future, only an eternal present. All the worries and anxieties that tormented me in earthly life seemed insignificant and distant. It was then that I noticed a presence. It was an ethereal figure, a luminous version of myself. She emanated an intense yet comforting light. There were no words, but somehow I knew she was communicating with me. Telepathically, she conveyed a single word: no. The meaning was clear and resonated through my being. I wasn't ready to go. This nonverbal communication was deeper and richer than any conversation I had ever had on Earth. It was as if we could share not just thoughts but entire emotions and experiences in an instant. In this state of formlessness, I experienced a sense of unity with everything that existed. The barriers between me and the other seemed artificial and illusory. I understood on a deep level that we are all connected, that we are part of a greater whole. The sense of peace that enveloped me was indescribable. It was as if all the love in the universe was embracing me. There was no fear, no doubt, just complete acceptance and an understanding that went beyond words. I realized that what we call death is merely a transition. Consciousness, the essential I.E., continues. This revelation was profoundly liberating. All the fears and anxieties I carried about death simply dissolved. At the same time, I felt a deep connection to all the lives I had lived and all the lives I would still live. It was as if I could access a vast reservoir of knowledge and experiences. I understood that my current existence as Melisande was just a small part of a much larger journey. In this state, I also had glimpses of what we might call the divine plan. I saw how each life, each choice, each experience fit into a larger and more beautiful pattern than anything we could imagine on Earth. It was a cosmic tapestry of incredible complexity and beauty. As I absorbed all these revelations, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for life, for death, for every experience that had brought me to that moment. I understood that every challenge, every pain, every joy had a purpose in the grand scheme of things. While I floated in this state of expanded consciousness, I felt a shift. It was as if an invisible force was pulling me back. The sensation was similar to being dragged by an underwater current, irresistible and inevitable. The transition was abrupt and disorienting. In one moment, I was pure consciousness, free from the limitations of the physical body. In the next, I felt myself being compressed, forced back into a form that felt strangely small and restrictive. The pain was intense. It was as if every cell in my body was screaming in protest. I imagined this must be what a diver feels when surfacing too quickly from the depths of the ocean. The pressure was overwhelming. Slowly, I began to regain the sensation of my physical body. First, it was sound, the constant beep of the heart monitor, the agitated voices of the doctors and nurses. Then, touch. I felt the rough hospital sheet against my skin, the IV needle in my arm. When I finally opened my eyes, I was greeted by a world that seemed more vibrant than ever. The colors were more intense, the sounds sharper. It was as if my senses had been amplified. The doctors were stunned. I heard one of them murmur, "It's a miracle. She was clinically dead for several minutes." Another replied, "I've never seen anything like this in my entire career." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and sore from the breathing tube that had been removed. A nurse approached with a glass of water, her eyes wide with astonishment. As I regained my ability to speak, I began to recount what I had experienced. I described the sensation of floating above my body, the conversations I heard in the emergency room. The doctors exchanged incredulous glances. One of them, Dr. Thompson, approached me with a look of curiosity. "Ms. Kincaid," he said, "you mentioned hearing our conversations. Can you tell me exactly what you heard?" With difficulty, I repeated some of the phrases I had overheard during my out-of-body experience. Dr. Thompson's face turned pale. "This is extraordinary," he murmured. "Those conversations took place while you were clinically dead. There is no medical explanation for this." Gradually, the reality of the situation began to sink in. I had died. I had experienced something that went beyond everything I believed possible, and now, I was back. Exhaustion overwhelmed me. My newly revived body craved rest, but my mind was in turmoil. How could I, a skeptical scientist, explain what had happened? How would this change my worldview, my understanding of reality? As I drifted into a deep sleep, one certainty formed in my mind. Nothing would ever be the same again. I had crossed a threshold and returned, and now I carried knowledge that could not be ignored or denied. In the days following my return, I went through a whirlwind of emotions and revelations. The reality of my experience was still settling in, and each moment brought new insights and challenges. One of the first things I noticed was a change in my relationship with alcohol. Before my near-death experience, I had struggled with alcoholism. It was a constant battle, a dependence that consumed me. But now, to my surprise and the doctors, I no longer felt any desire to drink. It was as if the addiction had been ripped from me, a blessing I hadn't asked for, but one that I received. What I once considered a crutch, a necessary escape, now seemed like an anchor that had kept me from living fully. The mental clarity I experienced was overwhelming, but the transformation didn't stop at the physical aspect. My perspective on life, death, and the purpose of existence had shifted dramatically. The concerns that once consumed me, work, social status, others, expectations, now seemed trivial compared to the greater truths I had glimpsed. I began to question my life choices. The toxic marriage with Jonah, which I had tolerated for so long, now felt like a self-imposed prison. The scientific career, which had once been the center of my identity, no longer satisfied me in the same way. I felt an urgency to share what I had experienced, to help others understand that there is more to existence than what we can see and touch. At the same time, I knew that many, especially in the scientific community, would receive my account with skepticism, if not open disdain. One of the most profound revelations was the understanding of the interconnectedness of all things. The sense of unity I had experienced during my NDE stayed with me, fundamentally altering the way I related to the world around me. Today, in September 2024, I still feel that deep connection with everything and everyone. This new perspective brought unexpected challenges. How could I explain to my fellow scientists that reality is much vaster and more complex than our instruments can measure. How could I reconcile my spiritual experience with my scientific training? I decided that I could no longer live a divided life. I couldn't pretend that I hadn't experienced something profound and transformative. The decision to change my life became non-negotiable. I felt a force within me that I couldn't ignore, a call to something greater. Instead of returning to my work as a research scientist, I chose to become a teacher. I decided to dedicate my life to helping young people in vulnerable situations, sharing not only academic knowledge but also the life lessons I had learned through my experience. At the same time, I realized the importance of sharing the message I had received during my NDE, the need to tune in to a greater reality, especially with the changes that are approaching. I feel that we are on the brink of a major spiritual transition, something that goes beyond the social or technological changes we see around us. This transition, which I believe will begin in October of this year, is not something to be feared, but embraced. It is an opportunity for humanity to evolve, to connect more deeply with each other and with the universe. Of course, not everyone receives this message with open arms. Many, especially those clinging to rigid worldviews, see it with skepticism or even hostility. But I've learned to accept this with compassion. After all, not long ago, I would have rejected such ideas myself. The journey of transformation hasn't been easy. I've had to face deeply rooted fears, question long-held beliefs, and, in many cases, rebuild my life from scratch. But each challenge, each moment of doubt, has only served to reinforce my conviction that I am on the right path. Today, I look to the future with a mixture of anticipation and serenity. I know there is much work to be done, many people to reach and help, but I also know that I am not alone on this journey. Each day I encounter more people who are awakening to this new reality, ready to be part of the great change that is coming. In the months following my near-death experience, I dove headfirst into a new phase of my life. I returned to study, no longer focused solely on hard sciences, but exploring fields I would have once dismissed as pseudoscience or New Age spirituality. I completed my degree in education and decided to pursue a master's and a PhD in psychology and consciousness studies. Each class was an opportunity to explore the questions I had previously ignored, to seek bridges between traditional scientific knowledge and the transcendent experiences that many, like myself, had lived through. At the same time as I was studying, I began teaching at a school for at-risk youth. It was quite a challenge. These teenagers, many of them disillusioned with the educational system and life in general, initially viewed me with suspicion. Who was this crazy ex-scientist talking about near-death experiences and spiritual transformation? But little by little, as I shared not only academic knowledge, but also my own journey of overcoming, I began to earn their trust. I saw young people who were on the verge of dropping out of school finding new purpose. I saw eyes light up with the understanding that they were more than just their physical bodies, more than their current circumstances. One student in particular, Jasmine, deeply touched me. She had recently lost her mother and was struggling with depression. After one of our classes on consciousness and the continuity of life after death, she stayed behind to talk with me. With tears in her eyes, she told me that for the first time since her mother's death, she felt hope. Moments like this remind me why I chose this path. It's not just about passing on information, but about offering a new perspective, a new way to see the world and oneself. Of course, it's not all smooth sailing. I face resistance from more traditional colleagues who see my curriculum as too esoteric. Some parents question the appropriateness of discussing topics like life after death with teenagers. But I stand firm in my conviction that these young people deserve access to a broader view of reality. As I teach, I continue to learn. Every interaction with my students, every challenging question they ask, leads me to explore the mysteries of consciousness and existence even more deeply. It's an ongoing process of growth and discovery. Today, as I prepare for another day of teaching, I feel deep gratitude. Gratitude for the second chance I've been given, for the opportunity to make a difference in these young lives, and for the continuous journey of learning that life is. And with that gratitude comes the anticipation for what the future holds, especially with the changes I believe will soon begin. The near-death experience not only gave me visions of the beyond, but also forced me to look inward, to the dark corners of my psyche that I had ignored for so long. It was as if the light I experienced during the NDE illuminated not just the path ahead but also the path behind. I began to have flashbacks to moments from my childhood, scenes I had deeply buried in my memory, memories of an absent father, an emotionally distant mother, moments of loneliness and confusion that shaped who I became. I realized that many of my life choices, the toxic marriage, the alcoholism, even my almost obsessive devotion to science, were ways of coping with these unresolved traumas. It was as if I had been constantly running, using work, alcohol, and dysfunctional relationships as shields against the pain I carried. I decided it was time to face these demons head-on. I started therapy, something I would have once dismissed as unnecessary. In the early sessions, I felt incredibly vulnerable. It was difficult to admit, even to myself, how hurt I was. But gradually, as I explored these old wounds, I began to feel a sense of liberation. Each painful memory I confronted, each repressed emotion I allowed myself to feel, was like removing a weight I didn't even know I was carrying. One of the most significant discoveries was realizing how much my need for approval was tied to childhood experiences. I always felt pressured to be the best, to prove my worth through academic and professional achievements. This pressure led me to ignore my own emotional and spiritual needs for so long. I also began to understand my relationship with Jonah better. I saw how my fear of abandonment and low self-esteem had kept me trapped in a marriage that had long since become toxic. It was a painful, but necessary realization. The healing process was not linear. There were days when I felt overwhelmed by the intensity of the emotions I was unearthing. But with each step, I felt I was getting closer to who I truly was, beneath all the layers of trauma and conditioning. A practice that became fundamental in this process was meditation. Through it, I learned to observe my thoughts and emotions without judgment, to be present with discomfort, instead of running from it. It was challenging at first, but over time, it became a source of peace and clarity. Today, I look back and see how much I've grown. The traumas are still there, part of my story, but they no longer define me. I've learned to embrace all parts of myself, including those I once tried to hide or deny. This process of personal healing has become an integral part of my work as an educator and speaker. I share my journey not to present myself as a perfect example, but to show that it is possible to transform even the most painful experiences into sources of growth and wisdom. As I approached September 2024, I felt a growing urgency to share the message I received during my near-death experience. The vision of a great spiritual transition, which I believe will begin in October this year, has become the central focus of my work and my life mission. I began organizing lectures and workshops, not just in schools and universities, but also in community centers, churches, and even businesses. My goal was to reach as many people as possible to help them prepare for the changes that are coming. It's not always easy. Often, I'm met with skepticism, sometimes even hostility. There are those who see me as a religious fanatic, others who accuse me of spreading unnecessary panic, but there are also many who resonate deeply with the message, who feel that something significant is about to happen. In my talks, I emphasize that this transition is not something to be feared, but embraced. It's not about the end of the world in an apocalyptic sense, but rather a profound shift in humanity's collective consciousness. I explain that we are entering a period of intense energetic transformation, where old structures, both internal and external, will be challenged and, in many cases, dissolved. I encourage people to prepare, not by stockpiling supplies or building bunkers, but by working on their personal and spiritual development. I talk about the importance of meditation, self-awareness, and healing past traumas. I explain that the more aligned we are with our true essence, the easier it will be to navigate the changes that are coming. I also address the importance of community during this period of transition. I encourage people to strengthen their bonds, to create networks of mutual support. I emphasize that although the spiritual journey is ultimately individual, we don't need to, and shouldn't, go through it alone. A significant part of my work involves helping people recognize and interpret the signs of the impending transition. I teach about synchronicities, about how to pay attention to dreams and intuitions, about how to tune into the subtle rhythms of the universe. As October approaches, I feel a mixture of excitement and apprehension. I know that not everyone will be prepared for the changes that will come. I know there will be confusion, fear, and resistance, but I also know deep in my being that this transition is necessary and ultimately beneficial for humanity's evolution. My hope is that through my work, I can help at least a few people navigate this period with more grace and understanding, that I can be a beacon of light in times that may seem dark to many. As I prepare for another lecture, I take a deep breath and remember the peace and love I experienced during my NDE. It is this memory that guides me, that gives me the strength to continue, even when the path seems difficult. And it is this same peace and love that I wish to share with the world, especially now, on the verge of this great transition. As my mission to prepare people for the spiritual transition gains momentum, I face a series of challenges that test my resolve and help me grow in unexpected ways. One of the biggest obstacles has been dealing with the skepticism and resistance from certain sectors of society. My former colleagues from the scientific world, in particular, have been difficult to reach. Some accuse me of having lost my mind after my near-death experience, while others suggest that I am exploiting vulnerable people with spiritual fantasies. These criticisms, I admit, sometimes shake me. There are moments when I wonder if I am truly doing the right thing, if I am not simply projecting my own desires and fears onto the world. But then I remember the clarity and certainty I felt during my experience, and I find the strength to continue. Another challenge has been balancing my mission with my personal life. Since I began sharing my message more widely, my schedule has become incredibly full. I'm constantly traveling, giving lectures, conducting workshops, and doing interviews. It's rewarding work, but also exhausting. I've had to learn how to set boundaries, to say no to some opportunities to preserve my physical and mental health. I've also had to work on my personal relationships, especially with my sister Marissa, who has been my greatest support throughout this journey. One particularly challenging aspect has been dealing with people's expectations. Many see me as some kind of guru or prophet, expecting me to have all the answers. I constantly have to remind myself and others that I am just a messenger, someone who had a glimpse of something greater, but who is still learning and growing like everyone else. At the same time, I face those who expect me to produce concrete proof of the imminent transition or the reality of life after death. I have to explain repeatedly that some experiences transcend our current capacity for scientific measurement, and that the coming transformation is more of a shift in consciousness than a physically observable event. Despite these challenges, every obstacle has proven to be an opportunity for growth. I've learned to be more patient, more compassionate with those who don't share my vision. I've developed a resilience I didn't know I had, capable of holding on to my truth even in the face of doubt and ridicule. My own understanding of the message I received continues to evolve. The more I share and interact with different people, the more nuances and layers I discover. It's a constant process of refinement and expansion. One of the most valuable lessons I've learned is the importance of authenticity. At first, I tried to tailor my message to please different audiences, but I realized that this only diluted the impact of what I had to share. Now, I strive to be genuine in all my interactions, trusting that those who need to hear the message will receive it. I've also learned to value the power of silence and reflection. Amid the hustle and bustle of lectures and interviews, I set aside time every day to meditate and reconnect with the essence of the experience I had. This not only keeps me grounded, but also keeps the message alive and vibrant within me. As September 2024 progresses and October approaches, I feel an intensification of energy around me. More people seem to be awakening to the idea of an imminent great change. I receive more and more messages from individuals reporting mystical experiences, prophetic dreams, or simply an inexplicable sense that something significant is about to happen. These accounts strengthen me and remind me that I am not alone on this journey. Many of us feel the call to a new way of being, a new way of living in harmony with the universe and with each other. Looking back, I see how each challenge, each moment of doubt, each criticism has contributed to making me who I am today. I am stronger, wiser, more compassionate, and I am ready for whatever comes, confident that no matter what the future holds, I will be prepared to face it with courage and love. Today, sitting in my office, watching the sunset through the window, I reflect on the extraordinary journey that has brought me here. It's hard to believe that 4 years have passed since my near-death experience, an event that completely redefined the course of my life. I vividly remember that moment when I floated above my own body, free from physical limitations, immersed in an indescribable light and love. That experience remains the compass that guides my actions and decisions. I did not feel any negative emotions during my NDE. In fact, the sense of peace I experienced was beyond anything I could have imagined. My journey since then has been a path of healing, not just for me, but for many who have crossed my path. I have left behind the skeptical scientist I once was, but I have not abandoned my love for knowledge and the pursuit of truth. Instead, I have expanded my definition of what is real and possible. Looking ahead to the fast approaching month of October, I feel a mixture of anticipation and serenity. I firmly believe we are on the brink of a significant transformation, a shift in collective consciousness that has the potential to redefine our existence as a species. I know that many still doubt, still question, and that's okay. I don't expect everyone to believe my words or accept my experience as universal truth. My role is not to convince, but to offer a different perspective, a glimpse of a wider reality. What I most want to convey, above all, is the message of love and connection that I experienced during my NDE. Regardless of what October may bring, I believe our greatest strength lies in our ability to love, to connect with each other and with the universe around us. Today, I dedicate my life to teaching and inspiring. I am grateful to have returned, to have been given the chance to help others tune into the light we all carry within us. The spiritual transition that is approaching is not something to be feared, but an opportunity for growth and evolution. As I prepare for the events I believe will begin next month, I remain anchored in the peace I experienced during my NDE. That peace is always with me, a constant reminder that, no matter what happens, deep down, everything is okay. My hope for the future is that more and more people awaken to their true nature, that they recognize the interconnectedness of all things. I envision a world where compassion and understanding replace fear and division, where we recognize that we are all part of something greater. As the sun sets, marking the end of another day, I feel a deep sense of gratitude for life, for death, for every experience that has brought me to this moment. And with that gratitude comes a sense of readiness. I am ready for whatever comes, ready to embrace the changes ahead, ready to continue this incredible journey that is life. As the stars begin to appear in the night sky, I smile to myself. No matter what the future holds, I know that we are all in this together, and together I believe we can create a brighter, more loving, and more conscious world. This is the promise of the approaching transition, and I am honored to be a part of it. If you enjoyed this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch every new video and help us spread this message to as many people as possible. See you next time.